Something big is happening with XRP right now. And most people are completely missing the signal because they are only looking at the price and not what is building behind the scenes. And if you don't understand this moment, you could either panic sell at the wrong time or completely miss one of the most important setups XRP has had in years, because right now the market is showing mixed signals. But underneath that confusion, there are powerful developments quietly aligning that could decide the next major move for XRP. Right now, XRP is sitting in one of the most confusing but critical positions it has been in for a long time. And that is exactly why people are asking what is really happening. Because on the surface, it looks simple, but in reality, there are multiple forces pulling XRP in different directions at the same time. At the moment, XRP is trading around the 140 range, and recently it pushed slightly above that level again, which might not look like a big move, but this level is actually very important because it acted as strong resistance earlier in 2026. And now the price is trying to hold above it, which tells us that the market is testing whether XRP is ready for a bigger move or not. Now, here is where things get interesting because this is not just about price movement, this is about market structure. Traders are currently watching a specific pattern that appeared in 2025. And when that pattern showed up last time, XRP moved up by around 66% in a very short period. And now that same type of setup is forming again, which is why attention is suddenly increasing. At the same time, the overall crypto market is also influencing XRP because Bitcoin and other major coins are moving based on global economic factors like interest rates and big company earnings. And when these things create uncertainty, XRP usually moves more slowly because investors become cautious and wait for confirmation before making big decisions. But here is the part that most people are not paying attention to, and that is the bigger shift that has already happened in the background. For years, XRP was under heavy pressure because of regulatory issues, especially in the United States, and that created fear and uncertainty, which limited its growth. But now that situation has changed significantly because the major legal battle has already been resolved, and that removed a huge barrier that was holding XRP back for almost 5 years. However, even after this major breakthrough, the price has not exploded the way many people expected, and this is exactly why confusion is spreading in the market. Some people believe XRP is undervalued and ready to move, while others think it is still struggling to prove itself, and both sides actually have valid reasons. On one side, XRP has strong potential because blockchain payments are becoming more common and real world use is increasing. But on the other side, competition from stablecoins and other digital assets is also growing, which is limiting how fast XRP can expand. So, what we are seeing right now is not a simple bullish or bearish situation. It is a transition phase where XRP is trying to move from hype driven cycles into real utility driven growth. And that kind of shift usually takes time. And during that time, the price often moves sideways, creating frustration for investors who expect fast gains. Another important thing to understand is that even though XRP had massive rallies in the past, it has never gone beyond its all time high of around 384. And that is something serious investors are always thinking about because it raises a question about whether XRP can finally break that level or if it will continue to struggle below it. So when people say, what is happening with XRP? The real answer is that XRP is currently at a decision point, not crashing, not exploding, but building pressure. And when markets build pressure like this, it usually leads to a strong move. But the direction of that move depends on what happens next in terms of adoption, regulation, and overall market sentiment. And right now, all of those factors are active at the same time, which is why this moment is so important and why so many experienced investors are watching XRP very closely without making emotional decisions. Now, to really understand what is happening with XRP right now, you have to look beyond just charts and headlines because one of the biggest drivers of XRP has always been its connection to real world financial systems. And this is where things are quietly becoming very important. XRP is not just another crypto that depends only on hype or community excitement. It is designed to solve a specific problem, which is fast and low cost cross border payments. And that use case is starting to gain more attention again as global financial systems continue to modernize. At the center of this discussion is Ripple, the company closely associated with XRP, which has been working for years to build partnerships with banks and financial institutions around the world. And while this progress has been slow and sometimes frustrating for investors, it has not stopped. In fact, the quiet nature of this progress is exactly why many people are underestimating what could be building right now, because major financial changes do not happen overnight. They happen step by step, often without much public attention until they reach a tipping point. One of the key things happening right now is the increasing demand for faster international payments, especially in regions where traditional banking systems are slow, expensive, or unreliable. This creates a natural opportunity for technologies like XRP because it can settle transactions in seconds instead of days and at a much lower cost compared to traditional systems like Swift. This advantage is not just theoretical, it is practical. And as more institutions look for efficiency, solutions like XRP become more relevant. However, this is where reality becomes more complex because even though XRP has this advantage, it is not alone in the market anymore. Stable coins, central bank digital currencies, and even other blockchain projects are also trying to solve the same problem. And some of them already have strong adoption in certain regions. This competition is one of the reasons why XRP is not moving as fast as many expected after its legal clarity, because the market is no longer empty, it is crowded and highly competitive. Another important factor that is affecting XRP right now is investor psychology, because after years of legal uncertainty, many investors became cautious. And even though the situation has improved, that caution has not completely disappeared. People who held XRP for a long time are now more careful, and new investors are waiting for stronger confirmation before entering the market in a big way. This creates a situation where positive news does not immediately lead to massive price increases because the market is still rebuilding confidence. At the same time, there is also a shift happening in how investors evaluate crypto projects because earlier cycles were mostly driven by hype and speculation, but now there is more focus on real utility and long term sustainability. This shift actually benefits XRP in the long run because it has a clear use case, but in the short term, it creates slower price movement because investors are taking more time to analyze and verify before making decisions. There is also something else happening behind the scenes that many people are not noticing, and that is the role of large investors, often called whales, who can influence the market by moving large amounts of XRP. These players usually do not act based on emotions. They act based on strategy. And when they accumulate or distribute XRP, it can create movements that look confusing to regular investors. Sometimes the price stays stable even when there is strong buying happening, and other times it drops quickly even without major negative news. And this behavior often leads to fear and uncertainty among smaller investors. In addition to that, global economic conditions are also playing a role because when interest rates are high or financial markets are uncertain, investors tend to reduce risk, and that affects all cryptocurrencies, including XRP. So even if XRP has strong fundamentals, it cannot completely escape the influence of the broader financial environment. So when you combine all of these factors, the picture becomes much clearer. XRP is not being ignored, it is being evaluated very carefully by the market. There is real progress happening in terms of utility and adoption, but at the same time, there is competition, caution, and external pressure from the global economy. This creates a slow but meaningful buildup rather than a sudden explosive move. And this is exactly why this moment feels confusing, because people are expecting immediate results after years of waiting, but the market is behaving in a more mature and controlled way. Instead of reacting to hype, it is reacting to real developments. And that kind of shift takes time to fully reflect in the price. What matters now is not just what XRP has done in the past, but how it positions itself in this new phase of the crypto market, where only projects with strong use cases and real world integration are likely to survive and grow over time. Now, at this stage, to fully understand what is happening with XRP, you have to look closely at the price behavior itself, because the chart is not just numbers moving up and down, it is a reflection of decisions being made by thousands of investors at the same time. And right now, those decisions are showing something very important. XRP is currently moving in a tight range. And while many people see that as boring or disappointing, experienced traders see it as a sign of pressure building, because markets usually do not stay quiet for long, especially when there is strong attention and ongoing developments behind the asset. What is happening right now is a classic consolidation phase where the price moves sideways between key levels. And in this case, the most important area is around the $1.20 to $1.50 range, because this zone is acting as both support and resistance depending on how the price reacts. When XRP drops closer to the lower side, buyers step in and push it back up. And when it moves toward the higher side, sellers take profit and slow it down. And this continuous push and pull creates a tight structure that eventually leads to a breakout. But here is the key detail that most people miss, and that is the difference between weak consolidation and strong consolidation. Weak consolidation usually happens when interest is fading and volume is decreasing, which often leads to a breakdown. But strong consolidation happens when the price holds steady while interest slowly increases. And that usually leads to an upward breakout. Right now, XRP is showing signs of strong consolidation, not weak. And that is why many analysts are paying close attention to it. Another important signal comes from volume patterns, because volume tells you how much real participation is happening in the market. And recently, there have been periods where XRP volume increased during upward moves but stayed controlled during pullbacks, which suggests that buyers are becoming more active than sellers. This does not guarantee an immediate rally, but it shows a shift in momentum that could become stronger if it continues. At the same time, there is also a psychological level that everyone is watching, and that is the $2 mark, because breaking above that level would not just be a technical move, it would also be a mental shift for investors, as it would signal that XRP is finally regaining strong upward momentum after a long period of uncertainty. When markets break key psychological levels, they often attract new attention and new capital, which can accelerate the move. However, it is also important to stay realistic, because if XRP fails to break above resistance and instead drops below support, then the market could enter a deeper correction phase. And that is why this moment is not just exciting, it is also risky. The same pressure that can push the price up can also push it down if the conditions are not strong enough. Another factor that is adding to this situation is the behavior of long term holders, because many people who bought XRP years ago are still holding, waiting for a major breakout. And when the price gets closer to key levels, some of these holders may start taking profits, which can slow down the upward movement. At the same time, new investors may enter the market, creating a balance between buying and selling that keeps the price in range until one side becomes stronger. There is also increasing attention from technical analysts who are comparing the current structure with previous cycles, especially the pattern that appeared before XRP's last major rally. And while history does not repeat exactly, it often creates similar setups, because human behavior in markets tends to follow patterns. Right now, some of those similarities are visible, which is why expectations are starting to build again. In addition to that, social sentiment is slowly changing because after a long period of frustration, more people are starting to talk about XRP again. And when attention increases, it often leads to higher trading activity, which can support a breakout if combined with strong fundamentals. So, what we are seeing right now is not random movement. It is a structured phase where the market is deciding its next direction. And that decision will likely come from a combination of technical breakout, investor confidence, and real world developments. And this is why this moment is so important because once XRP breaks out of this range, the move could be fast and strong. And by the time it becomes obvious to everyone, a large part of the move may already be completed, which is exactly how markets usually behave. Now, as the pressure continues to build around XRP, the most important question is not just what is happening right now, but what could happen next, because this is where the situation becomes even more serious. At this stage, XRP is approaching a moment where external catalysts can play a major role in deciding the direction of the next big move. And these catalysts are not always obvious because they develop over time and then suddenly impact the market all at once. One of the biggest factors to watch is institutional involvement because large financial players have the power to move markets in ways that retail investors cannot. Over the past few years, institutions have slowly entered the crypto space, but their approach is very different from regular investors because they focus on long term strategy, regulatory clarity, and real world use cases. XRP has always been positioned as a bridge between traditional finance and blockchain technology, and that makes it attractive in theory. But institutions do not act on theory, they act on confirmed opportunity. This means that if XRP begins to see stronger integration into real financial systems, or if more partnerships become active in a meaningful way, then institutional demand could increase. And that kind of demand does not create small price movements, it creates sustained trends. However, until that demand becomes visible in data, the market will continue to move cautiously because institutions usually build positions slowly and quietly before making any large moves that attract public attention. Another major catalyst is regulatory clarity across different countries, not just in one region, because crypto is a global market. While XRP has already passed through one of the most important legal challenges in its history, the global regulatory environment is still evolving and different countries are taking different approaches. If more regions create clear and supportive regulations for digital assets, it could open the door for wider adoption of technologies like XRP. But if regulations become restrictive, it could slow down growth and create uncertainty again. At the same time, there is growing discussion around central bank digital currencies, often called CBDCs, and how they will interact with existing blockchain systems. This is a very important area because if XRP or the technology behind it becomes part of the infrastructure used for these systems, it could significantly increase its relevance. However, this is still a developing space, and there are many competing technologies trying to position themselves in the same area, which means nothing is guaranteed. Another factor that cannot be ignored is the overall direction of the crypto market, especially the influence of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin still acts as a leader for the entire market. When Bitcoin enters a strong upward trend, it usually pulls other cryptocurrencies with it, including XRP. And when it faces resistance or correction, it often slows down the entire market. This relationship means that even if XRP has strong individual developments, its price movement can still be affected by what is happening with Bitcoin and the broader market sentiment. There is also something happening at the macro level that many people overlook, and that is the role of global liquidity. Because when there is more money flowing into financial markets, risk assets like cryptocurrencies tend to perform better And when liquidity tightens, those same assets can struggle. This creates an environment where XRP's performance is not just dependent on its own progress, but also on the availability of capital in the global financial system. In addition to all of this, there is the factor of timing, because markets do not always react immediately to positive developments. Sometimes the groundwork is laid quietly over months or even years, and then suddenly the market recognizes the value and moves quickly. This delayed reaction is one of the most frustrating aspects for investors, but it is also one of the most common patterns in financial markets. So when people are asking what is happening with XRP, the answer at this stage is that multiple catalysts are aligning, but they have not fully triggered yet. The structure is forming, the attention is returning, and the conditions are slowly improving, but the final push that confirms the next major trend has not happened yet. And this is exactly why this moment feels so intense, because it sits right between uncertainty and opportunity, where the downside risk still exists, but the upside potential is also becoming more visible, and the market is waiting for a clear signal before making its next decisive move. Now, as everything comes together, it becomes clear that what is happening with XRP right now is not a random situation or a simple pause in price movement. It is a setup phase where multiple elements are slowly aligning. And this is exactly the type of moment where the market tests patience more than anything else. Most people expect fast results, especially in crypto. But the reality is that the biggest moves often come after long periods of quiet accumulation and uncertainty. And that is exactly what XRP appears to be going through right now. At this stage, there are two possible paths forming in front of XRP, and understanding both of them is very important because this is not a guaranteed outcome situation. The first path is the bullish scenario, where XRP successfully breaks out of its current range, holds above key resistance levels, and starts building strong upward momentum. If that happens, then the combination of improved regulation, increasing utility, and growing market confidence could push XRP into a new phase where it finally challenges its previous highs and possibly moves beyond them. This type of move would not happen in a straight line. There would still be pullbacks and corrections along the way, but the overall direction would be upward, supported by stronger fundamentals and renewed investor interest. The second path is the bearish or delayed scenario, where XRP fails to break key resistance and instead continues to move sideways or even drops below important support levels. If that happens, it would not necessarily mean that XRP is finished or has no future, but it would mean that the market needs more time to build strength, and that could extend this consolidation phase for a longer period. In this case, investors who are expecting quick gains may become frustrated, and that frustration can sometimes lead to emotional decisions like selling at the wrong time, which is exactly what the market often tests during these phases. What makes this moment even more important is the emotional pressure that comes with it, because uncertainty creates doubt, and doubt can lead to hesitation or impulsive actions. Some people may feel like they are missing out and rush into the market without proper understanding, while others may feel tired of waiting and exit just before a potential move begins. This emotional cycle is very common in financial markets, and it is one of the main reasons why many investors struggle to benefit from long term opportunities. At the same time, there is a growing realization in the market that projects with real world use cases are more likely to survive and grow compared to those driven purely by hype, and this shift is slowly working in favor of XRP. However, this does not mean that success is guaranteed. It simply means that XRP is positioned in a way that gives it a chance to compete in a more mature and demanding market environment. Another important point to understand is that timing the exact move is extremely difficult, even for experienced traders, because markets are influenced by many factors at the same time. including technical patterns, investor sentiment, global events, and unexpected news. This is why focusing only on short term price action can be misleading, especially during a phase like this where the market is building toward a larger decision. So, the real takeaway from everything happening right now is that XRP is at a critical stage where patience, awareness, and realistic expectations matter more than hype or fear. The signals are there, the structure is forming, and the attention is returning, but the confirmation of the next major move has not fully arrived yet. And until it does, the market will continue to test both confidence and discipline. In moments like this, the difference between success and failure often comes down to how investors react, not just what the market does, because reacting emotionally can lead to poor decisions, while staying informed and patient can create better opportunities over time. Before ending, it is very important to understand that this content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice because the crypto market is highly volatile and unpredictable, and every investment decision carries risk. Always do your own research, manage your risk carefully, and never invest more than you can afford to lose. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to stay updated with important XRP developments, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update.